Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're so excited and thankful that you can all take the time and spend a little under an hour with us this evening. A Good Place Therapy is a downtown New York City based therapy practice. We actually are about to open up our San Francisco location, which is very exciting. And we also are accepting virtual clients as well. We have a staff of over 20 therapists who specialize in a range of topics, really focused on trauma, grief, depression, postpartum health, racial identity, eating disorders, maternal health, and really a range of so many more topics. And we really felt like, especially during this time in our world right now, we wanted to lead a community support series and help people with these topics that, if maybe someone can't afford therapy or someone, is really iffy on whether they want to start seeing a therapist. We wanted to offer these topics so that people can really get the benefit of hearing real facts and information from a real licensed therapist. So each month, the way that the community support series works, and this is actually our second month hosting it, each month in A Good Place, an AGP therapist will host a conversation about an important topic to help reduce stigma in that specific topic. So this one is navigating your mental health during the fourth trimester. A lot of times, and as Amy will get into it, during that fourth trimester, so the period after giving birth or bringing a baby home, I, for one, felt isolated and kind of alone during that time. So Amy's going to shed some light on that from a therapist's perspective and bring in a lot of data and real information. And of course, each session of these community support series is designed to provide the participants with skills and information that they need to support themselves, your friends, family, and anyone that you know who may be going through this. So we hope that you guys can really take something great out of it. And of course, this session is going to be recorded. So we will provide each of you with a recording. And lastly, every session is free. So feel free to join future sessions that we have. They're always going to be free. So now to just introduce Amy. Amy has a master's of social work from Hunter College. She joined the A Good Place Therapy team, I believe, over the summer. So we're really happy to have her.
Oh,
in the fall, I'm sorry. Like, what are seasons with COVID?
Yeah, that's true. Who knows this year?
Yeah, it's like seasons, like, what are they? Time is going so slow and so quickly at the same time. But Amy specializes in women's mental health issues, ranging from infertility, miscarriage, pregnancy, postpartum mental health, and all of the above. She focuses also on anxiety, depression, and relationships as well. So we're very happy that she was able to lead this session. And one final note, we would love to take questions. So I was hoping that if anyone does have a question, feel free to put it and submit it in the chat. And then at the end, we can kind of go through some of the questions afterward. So thank you all again for joining, and I'll kick it off to Amy.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming today and joining me and A Good Place Therapy on this lovely, dreary, rainy evening, at least in New York. If you're tuning in from the West Coast, hi. I assume the weather's a little better over there. Yeah, and I'm seeing some familiar faces that I haven't seen in a while. It's so lovely. Some familiar names and some not familiar, unfamiliar faces and names. So that's exciting. Yeah, this is a very niche topic, but I feel like it's something that needs to be discussed over and over again. And I think every mental health topic needs to be discussed in a public setting or a public forum, because that's how we break stigma down. That's how we destigmatize and normalize feelings and experiences. So I came to speak today about navigating your mental health during the fourth trimester. And That, as Daniela said, is that period of time, a trimester. So the first 3 months of after childbirth, either bring a baby home, and that could be by childbirth, by adopting, intended parents via surrogacy, LGBTQI, same-sex partners. It doesn't matter where you're from, what race, what background. A newborn is a very intense experience. So yeah, I think Daniela already covered a little bit more about me and my background. A good place I've really started to focus a lot more on women's mental health issues, and also talking to clients about, pregnancy, is it right for them? Do they want it? And what that whole process looks like. So getting to the topic today, mental health in the fourth trimester, I just want to cover some main points of what we will be discussing today. That would be bringing the baby home, what that's like, and the experiences after childbirth, adoption, surrogacy, the baby blues, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and then we can talk about some mindfulness techniques in there, and some treatment options and what that will look like. So bringing baby home, that is quite an intense experience, and especially if you're a new parent and it's your first child. So let's start with childbirth. Childbirth can be intense. It can be traumatic. At some point in postpartum depression, I will cover traumatic childbirth and how that affects depression. Hormone levels, your hormone levels are very high when you're pregnant, and HCG, and then it drops after giving birth. Physical pain and recovery affects childbirth. So some people have a vaginal birth, some people have a C-section. It doesn't really matter what kind of childbirth you have. Both of them can be extremely painful and extremely tolling, both mentally and physically. As far as going through that process, depending upon how your childbirth goes, the support systems you have in place, the medical technology, the doctors, the nurses, the pain medication, all these different elements impact your experience, which then impacts your mental health after coming home from the hospital. A lot of people think that because having a baby, whether if it's not through childbirth, many people think, well, there's no way that you can get postpartum depression or have depression or mental health issues after bringing a baby home if you adopt, or if you're an intended parent of a surrogacy. That is not true. I just wanted to state that openly, that depression and anxiety and mental health does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you've given birth, or if you're adopting a baby, or like I said, or you're the intended parents of a surrogate baby. That experience is incredibly intense and stressful, and all new parents go through periods of lack of sleep, of changes in schedule, fear of not bonding with a baby, and stress over caring for a newborn. The change in the relationship dynamic between the partners, where two people might have had alone time and been able to do whatever they wanted. Now suddenly there's a new little person in your house that wants to be fed constantly, that needs, to be rocked and comforted and sleep, and it might be crying. So these things all bring about stress. And what does stress do? We don't know how to manage that. We don't know how to have the right resources available. That wears us down, creates havoc on the mental health. Also, compromised sleep is a huge element of having any postpartum mental health issues. So let's see. So baby blues. I just also want to cover the fact that a lot of people think that it's only women who go through these issues, but it has been a proven fact through research and many therapists dealing with family therapy and couples therapy, that men actually do have what we call paternal postpartum depression as well. Sometimes their sleep is impacted as well. Their relationship with their partner, they might feel angry, sad, jealous that they're not getting the attention or the love that they usually get from their partner because their partner is so focused on the baby. So I just wanted to say that this affects all new parents. Maybe hormonally a mother that goes through childbirth more, but like I said, it really has a toll on everybody. So what's the baby blues? Baby blues is very normal. It's very biological for most women and men after childbirth. It's a period of temporary moodiness that begins 1 to 3 days after delivery. So again, we're talking about HCG hormones and levels that just shoot down right after childbirth. And actually 60 to 80% of women experience this. So when I say normal, like it's quite normative. Symptoms include sadness, irritability, frustration, and fatigue, and just generally feeling off. Maybe not that pregnancy glow that everyone's talking about, or that happiness that the hormones put your body into because they prep you for the experience of having a baby. All of those start to go down, and the mood starts to destabilize. So when does the baby blues, what's the difference between the baby blues and postpartum depression? So why don't we look at those two factors? One is it'd be really rare not to have any mood issues and to not feel that irritability and sadness after bringing baby home or having a baby. But when does it start to cross into an area that we need to be extra mindful of and aware of to prevent, to protect the health of the parent and the health of the baby? This happens, I would say, anywhere between like 2 or 3 weeks up to an actual year. We classify postpartum depression as extreme sadness, despair, tearfulness, insomnia, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, compulsions, panic attacks, inability to cope, and suicidal thoughts. Basically, think of this as clinical depression or major depressive disorder, but that is sparked after bringing home a baby or having a child. And the reason why this is so essential that we talk about and why it's so important is because we need to protect, like I said, the impact on the mother-infant relationship or the father-infant relationship, the parent-infant relationship, and the well-being of the child. It is very important that that this is protected and that we educate ourselves and we become aware of what these signs are to look for. You know, this could really affect the relationship between the parent and the child. It could cause parent to be moody, withdrawn, not want to feed the baby, leave the baby to cry more often, not bond with the child, and also the suffering. Like, who wants to be going through the anxiety, panic attacks, intrusive thoughts, obsessive and compulsive behaviors? You know, is the baby breathing if you put the baby down? Is the baby eating enough? Why isn't the baby pooping? You know, all these things come into play, and it can become very overwhelming for the new parent. So what causes all this? As we mentioned before, it's triggered by hormonal changes after childbirth, but also they've found that people with genetic predisposition to depression and just in general hormonal mood disorders and postpartum depression are more likely to have the predisposition for postpartum depression, anxiety, and psychosis. And then lastly, like psychological and social changes we talked about before. Your role changes when you become a parent. So you are a person in the world, and then you have a baby and you bring a baby home, and now you are a parent and you are responsible for this small being. That changes you psychologically and having the stress of caring for this, and the social change of what that means to you, and the pressures of what does that look like? we think about this as, and it is supposed to be a very happy and lovely time in people's lives. And there's a lot of, grandparents and people around. Everybody's it's excited. It's a new life and it's an exciting time, but it's also a very challenging time that I think a lot of people don't talk about. And I think to have open conversations about this and to know that, it's okay to talk about this. People have come out and talked about this. Celebrities, I think it was Brooke Shields who came out and said she had suffered with a very intense postpartum depression. Meghan Markle came out recently and talked about the postpartum depression she went through after having Archie last year, and how important it is to get treatment, to get help for these issues. So going back to labor and childbirth, all of the things that can cause a traumatic birth, like not a birth not going according to plan, a severe medical intervention, some kind of emergency with the mother or the baby, and lack of support systems during labor, not having the right education or information around the process of birth, and having a good therapist, a good friend, family support, and just some kind of a group or a community in a sense that can support you through this journey. We did touch a little bit on anxiety that happens around a baby's health and all of the, it's really good to know that people that have pre-existing anxiety disorders or depression are at high risk for having postpartum mental health issues. So what happens, what are some good techniques that we use to combat some of the difficult symptoms of these mental health disorders? We can talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, interpersonal therapy, talk therapy, group support, but mindfulness exercises have been proven to really, really, really help people that are going through postpartum depression and just regular depression in general. And remember, anxiety can be seen as comorbid with depression. So sometimes anxiety is a symptom of a greater depressive episode or depression, and sometimes someone who's anxious can slip into a depression. So it's a comorbid situation. I want to talk a little bit about mindfulness, and in a sense, like how grounding techniques can really, really help somebody to become centered and to work on issues that are difficult to go through when bringing home a newborn. I would think one of the main techniques that most of you probably know and that is quite common would be breathing, mindfulness breathing techniques. So we can talk about, what does it mean to calm down, get very present. So I encourage all of you to take a deep breath. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds. And doing this slowly with awareness 4 times will really mellow you out and kind of make you a little bit more present of your surroundings. And I really needed that. So we have mindfulness breathing techniques. One that I really love is the 5 senses grounding technique. And it kind of shifts the brain off of obsessive thinking and worry. So let's say you're worrying about like, well, I don't know, did the baby get enough sleep? And like, is she going to roll over? Is she going to suffocate? Should I leave her alone in the room? Well, what can you do to just ground yourself in the moment? And this is a great technique because we talk about 5 senses. So see, touch, hear, smell, and taste. I would say start by naming one thing from each category. Like, I see the screen. I don't know if that's the most common. I can touch my keyboard. I hear the sound of the rain outside. I can smell my candle from A Good Place Therapy. And tasting tea, like just, drink water, drink tea. And what that does is it really grounds you and starts to get you into your body. And that's really, really important when working with trauma, which, as we talked about before, is it can be very present with, traumatic birth situations, and just in general, like worry and anxiety when that adrenaline is pumping, and you can't slow down your thoughts. This takes everything down a notch. And lastly, I think it's very helpful to create a grounding statement or an affirmation. And so all of those worries circling around in your head, what if the baby doesn't drink all of its milk, and what if the baby this and that, to stop and say, something to the effect of, today is Thursday, March 18th, and I am in my room with my baby, and we are both safe and we are both loved. And to repeat these positive affirmations over and over again. So that was just a little mid-presentation grounding. So we spoke about techniques to help with depression and anxiety, compulsive thinking, and trauma. But now I want to move into a more serious diagnosis that is much more rare, but we have postpartum psychosis. And essentially, postpartum psychosis, like I said, is extremely rare. About 1 in 1,000 people are affected by postpartum psychosis. And basically, when you think about depression, anxiety, and psychosis, somebody asked me the other day, well, what's the main difference? What's the difference? What is psychosis? Essentially, psychosis is losing touch with reality, and that's the main factor that differentiates psychosis with depression, is that reality factor. And that's when it gets very dangerous and very scary very quickly. And this could be hallucinations, delusions, rapid mood swings, suicidal thoughts, infanticidal thoughts or actions, which is actually means killing a baby, and that's very scary and very dangerous. So this goes more into the, and those could be auditory hallucinations, hearing voices. This is very, very rare, but it's, like I said, very dangerous, and it's a very serious emergency. And I just want to say that 20 to 30%, it's not on this slide, but 20 to 30% of women with pre-existing bipolar disorder actually suffer from postpartum psychosis. So that's information, and tells you if somebody that is in treatment or is being treated for bipolar disorder, they could be completely functioning in the world fine. They could have been on medication their whole life. They could have worked with a reproductive psychopharmacologist to prepare for pregnancy. But it's really important to be on the lookout that after childbirth, they are aware that this is something that they're at high risk for. And 5% of that 20 and 30% actually die by suicide. And 4.5% of that 20 or 30% do go through with the infanticide. So that is incredibly important information to know. And nobody wants to be in a position where it's too late. So it's important. Nobody thinks that these things can happen to them or that they know people. But then you'll hear of a situation, or you read a story online or in the newspaper. And so it's really important that we pay attention to these statistics and to the data, and we do as much as we can to protect people, and to not look down upon it, because it's literally a neurobiological disorder. There's nothing that one could do about it. It just happens. I also wanted to go back for a moment and talk a little bit about women of color being 50%. First of all, as far as by diagnosis, you think oh, well, all of these women have postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. But the truth of the matter that 50% of women that have postpartum depression or don't even go for help, are not even diagnosed. So that tells you right there how many people are out there suffering and not treating their symptoms. And then of that, African American women and Latino women are 2 times more likely to experience postpartum depression than white women, and less likely to receive treatment because of lack of resources. So that is really important information for all of us to have, and just to be aware of what's going on in the community, and why, why aren't we talking about the fact that people of color are not provided for in the same way that privileged people are, and how we can address those concerns on a more macro community level. Let's see. So I think we have a really good knowledge base of, what we're looking at diagnostically about for symptoms and criteria in postpartum mental health. But this leads us to, like, how do we help clients, and how do we treat these issues? And I'm a huge proponent and believer of group therapy and support groups. I believe that in issues like this, especially with depression, it's an incredibly isolating experience, and people make up a lot of, not excuses, but reasonings to isolate. Just like addiction or eating disorders, the depression or that disease, it really wants you to not reach out for help, and it really wants you to kind of isolate yourself. And that's dangerous. So I believe that reaching out for support for individual therapy is very important, but also maybe getting a referral for group therapy and joining a support group to meet other people that are going through what you're going through. The identification of certain issues is very important in order to get better, to break isolation, build connection, and talk through your issues. Whew. I also believe that a psychiatric evaluation is very essential, especially when dealing with, like we talked about, the postpartum psychosis. Very, very, very important, because we're talking about hormones, and we're talking about a neurobiological disorder, and there's only so much that talk and therapeutic techniques can do. So it's important to think of things holistically, like what can we do to talk out the social, psychological situations of the stress of having a new baby, but also learn about the treatment methods for minimizing depressive episodes, minimizing psychosis, and minimizing anxiety attacks. So I believe that, a great psychiatrist in partnership with a great psychotherapist, and self-care, like eating well, exercise, and you might not have time to eat well and exercise, and clearly not rest in the very beginning. And that's the hardest part. That's okay. I think the takeaway from this is to really focus on protecting a new parent's ability to sleep and to rest, because sleep regulates our system. Sleep is, the circadian rhythm is so important for mental health. You talk to anybody, getting a good night's sleep reduces depression, reduces anxiety. But unfortunately, those two things also cause sleep issues. So as a psychotherapist myself, I would recommend, group therapy. And people would say, well, what kind of therapy would you do with somebody dealing with these issues? And, it always goes back to cognitive behavioral therapy is very important, because it can retrain thoughts of feeling, let's say you don't feel worthy of having this baby, or you don't feel like a good mother. We can start to break down the thoughts lead to the feelings, and the feelings lead to the behaviors. So hopefully shifting and reframing thoughts can change the way that a new parent feels, and that will change the way that they behave and that they act. Let's see. And again, I believe that, destigmatizing and education is the most important thing on any topic, really. And the more we talk and have open conversations, the more we destigmatize these issues and have education, the more that we can do something about them. So that leads me to the end of my part, this is a picture of the Good Place Therapy office downtown, which is beautiful. And I encourage everybody that came here today to please use us as a referral. We treat many different issues, and that's it. So Daniela, did you want to? You need to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Amy, for sharing all of this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I actually posted one a few moments ago. I know you spoke about ways to cope with postpartum depression. So I was wondering, despite sometimes being predisposed to post because of genetics, is there a way to prevent it early on so that you don't even really get the symptoms of postpartum depression, or you just kind of don't even get those depressive episodes?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I believe that, like you said, like self-awareness is key to so many mental health issues. And being aware that maybe you have a history of depression, or being scared that you see yourself as possibly getting depressed after having a baby. I believe working with a great psychotherapist, in conjunction again with possibly if the client or patient is open to the idea of working with a good psychiatrist, to really work on tools to combat and manage and prepare for childbirth. Because like I said, education is key. Understanding what you're getting into is important. And if you can work with a team of therapists and doctors ahead of time, then and have a support system, make sure your partner is supportive, make sure that you have, maybe that you have, if you have resources to have help when you bring the baby home. If you don't, then working out some kind of a system where you can take turns, and really just being aware and being in touch with your body about what does it look like when I start to feel overwhelmed, or when I, feel down. So that's a great question.
Yeah, and Carrie's actually the founder of A Good Place Therapy. She writes here, and she wants to make a note that, I don't know if you can see her message, Amy, that about
Yeah.
OCD fears, which is
OCD.
really.
So Carrie says, I wanted to add OCD fears such as fear of killing the baby feels real. Somebody just tried to come in. Feels real, have intrusive thoughts or images of harm done to the baby, and they may start to do things to avoid this fear, compulsions to reinforce the thoughts. That's also a really great point, Carrie. Postpartum depression is basically an umbrella term, like I said, for anxiety, for PTSD. You have postpartum PTSD, postpartum OCD. You could start to break it down into categories, and essentially the only difference between regular OCD and PTSD and all of the above is that we have the postpartum in front of it, right? So that's the post having the baby or bringing the baby home. And the fears are much more specific to around the baby, like you said. So the compulsions or the behavior. So I think that's what's really important to recognize, that if you have a tendency for anxious thoughts and OCD, to work with the therapist, to reach out for help on working with a good therapist who specializes in OCD. And I know that, I think Carrie does, and a lot of the team here at A Good Place Therapy really focuses in on strategies to combat obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, reinforcing the thoughts. Does that answer?
Thank you, Amy. Yes, and Vicky is asking, are there specific support groups for postpartum depression?
Absolutely. In fact, there's many, and I would love to follow up with everybody today with a resource list in the New York City area, but I think there's some people that are tuning in from out of state. A great organization, which I'm in the process of getting certification with, is the Postpartum Support International. And they're essentially like the main hub of postpartum mental health. And they have chapters. They have a New York State chapter, New York City chapter. They're a great organization. There's another organization, it's slipping my mind. There's a few Jewish organizations in the city, and then there's I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I will follow up with everybody and we will send a great list. I think it's Selene. And if anybody else knows, feel free to chime in. There's a few other ones that offer support. And of course, you know, some of these places charge and some of them don't. It depends on where you're going and what resources you have. So yeah, there's a lot of support groups for this. I would love to run one for this practice at some point, but it's about getting, you know, tapping into the right market and clientele and being able to offer that kind of support. But I think that would be great. These of course would be time limited because nobody is postpartum forever and nobody wants anybody to have postpartum depression forever. But yeah, I think some kind of like an open postpartum group or working with, you know, OCD thoughts around about obsessions about baby and thoughts of like stress of becoming a new mother. I think that would be a great resource to provide to the downtown Manhattan area. So hopefully we can do something like that.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay tuned for what our next community support series session will be on. Feel free to email me with any questions. And of course, I will be reaching out to everyone with the recording of this session. You can feel free to share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, anyone you think that may benefit from this. And of course, if you have any questions pertaining to anything that Amy spoke about, please feel free to email her. Her email is here on this slide. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here today.
Yes, thank you all so much. And hopefully we can do a follow-up again and get more people and maybe partner with some other great organizations.